I like to squat it, squat it. I like to squat it, squat it. I like to squat it, squat it. You ever like to squat it? I like to squat it, squat it. I like to squat it, squat it. I like to squat it, squat it. You ever like to squat it? I like to squat it, squat it. I like to squat it, squat it. I like to squat it, squat it. You ever like to squat it? I like to squat it, squat it. I like to squat it, squat it. I like to squat it, squat it. You ever like to squat it? All over lifters all over the world. There can be only one man I say. I love how Volga squat them ass down.
Welcome to Squat Rex. Tonight we're going to talk about 5 common issues people have when squatting and what you can do to maybe correct those things. The issues we'll be talking about tonight are the heels coming off the ground when squatting, the hips shifting laterally to the left or right when squatting, the knees bowing inward when squatting, the knees bowing outward when squatting, and the bar causing pain on your back when squatting. Squatting issue common with people new to the squat are the heels coming off the ground when squatting. A lot of people will recommend that people squat with a small plate under their heels, maybe wear more of a heel when squatting. Those are probably fine, but they aren't going to treat the underlying cause. Usually the cause is lack of hip and hamstring flexibility. That, or they're just not used to the balance, they're worried about falling back, and they just need practice in doing that. A couple things that you can try, and I've mentioned this in a previous Squat Rex, is just to have the trainee sit at the bottom position holding a squat rack or a bar. If they're comfortable enough, they can just do it free here, and keeping the weight on their heels, trying to keep the lower back as straight as possible. This is a good way to get the confidence up that they'll need when squatting with weight. Another thing that you can try with trainees, if you have a low platform of some sort, is you can have them stand with their heels square on a platform and the balls of their feet drifting off the edge. And if they practice squatting with a very, very light weight, as long as it's safe, or just with body weight, you can have them practice keeping their weight on their heels throughout the movement. Now this is going to be an unusual movement for them, and they might be a little bit nervous. You're going to have to judge that on the squatter. But it can be a useful tool in teaching them to keep the weight on their heels. One last thing about the heel raising off of the ground when squatting. It's usually not an ankle flexibility issue. A lot of times you'll hear people prescribing a lot of ankle flexibility stretches in order to correct the heel coming off the floor when squatting. Usually that's not the problem. Usually it's hamstrings or hips. Sometimes it can be knees as well. Occasionally it's ankles, but usually it's hips and hamstrings first. So, if you have someone who is squatting full squats or just a parallel, generally speaking, you'll notice that the flexion in the ankle is not so great. So it's usually not an ankle flexibility issue. If you work with people who have had hip issues, knee issues, ankle issues, a common form issue that they're going to have are the hips displacing one way or the other as they squat. Let me give you an illustration. Normally, as you come out for your squat, as you set up and as you descend into the squat, your hips will be descending straight down into your squat and then back up. If someone has had a knee injury or a hip injury or even an ankle injury, what might happen is the hips may displace either to the right or to the left at some part of their squat. Now sometimes this will happen at the bottom of the squat, sometimes it might show up in the middle of their squat, and then they might even out at the bottom. There are a few things that you can try to correct this. Usually the squatter isn't even going to feel this happening. Pointing it out on a video camera is the easiest way for them to see it. If they're looking in a mirror, the mirror tends to have a bit of a distortion to it, meaning people tend to see what they want to see in the mirror. So it's better if it's on video camera and if it's a straight shot from the back so that they can see that lateral movement. There are some exercises you can try to help correct this. Usually exercises like lunges, Bulgarian split squats, one-legged deadlifts, side lunges are excellent exercises to help bring up a weak side. When mentioning unilateral exercises, it'd be strange for me to omit a couple of great ones that you can try. Step-ups are one of them. I don't have the facilities here to necessarily do good step-ups, but if you have a step or a plyo box that you can set up high enough that you can set yourself up for a good step-up exercise, it's an excellent exercise. Another one would be variations of one-legged squats. The pistol is a good one. It's a very advanced drill. It's something you should spend quite a bit of time reviewing how to do. An excellent book by Pavel Tsatsouline is The Naked Warrior. He talks about the pistol and the one-arm push-up and other body weight exercises. It's an excellent book to pick up if you're interested in doing pistols. But essentially pistols are a one-legged squat, and you're going to have one leg suspended in front of you. You're going to descend with your hands in front of you into a full squat, and from this position you're going to come up. It's an advanced drill. It can be really tough on the knees and hips if you don't know what you're doing. So make sure that you seek out a qualified coach, read some instruction. Again, The Naked Warrior by Pavel Tsatsouline is an excellent resource. In Squat Rex 3, we talked about engaging the hips and hamstrings when squatting. A common issue when squatting is to see the knees bow inward when squatting, and it typically will look something like this. From the bottom, the knees will bow inward, and then they'll press the bar through. This typically means that the hip adductors are not being engaged correctly. As I said in Squat Rex 3, you want to imagine that your hips are outwardly rotated when squatting, and your knees should follow in line with your toes. If the adductors are not being utilized and your hips are not outwardly rotating as they should while squatting, you can try some hip adduction exercises. Some of them I've detailed in previous Squat Rexes, but simply putting a crossed over band around your legs and then working hip adduction in a seated position is a good way to get the hips engaged in the exercise. So with this type of exercise here, working hip adduction might be something you might give a shot to before squatting to kind of help you engage those hips into your squat. An issue with the knees bowing outward, this is a relatively uncommon issue, but occasionally you'll see someone set up and then their knees are going to bow outward as they squat. Generally what needs to happen is the squatter will need to reposition their feet and maybe take a slightly wider stance so that they are comfortable in opening up and squatting down into position. In Squat Rex 3, I mentioned that your legs should be outwardly rotated as they squat, and this will help engage the hips and the hamstrings. Hip outward rotation and leg outward rotation is essentially the same thing. However, I would like you to visualize the hip outwardly rotating rather than the knees. So as you squat, you really should be feeling that outward rotation, that external rotation in through your hips rather than your knees. You don't want your knees to bow out further than the line of the toes. So when you set up, make sure that your toes are positioned correctly, and as you descend into your squat, you want to be externally rotating the hips. Don't think knees as you externally rotate, think hips.